You're listening to The Virgin Sex Educator, a podcast devoted to tackling the taboo and finding the connection between spirituality and sexuality. To submit your anonymous questions, click the link in my Instagram bio. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my LDS Sex Education Parenting Series in partnership with sexedrescue.com. Today we are going to be talking about online sexual safety. Now, before anybody starts imagining that this is going to be an episode where I tell you all about like the best parental controls and like screen time limits, the latest social media apps that parents, should be concerned about, I want to just tell you that that is not my area of expertise. So that's not what this episode is going to be. Technology in general is obviously going to be a huge part of this conversation, but I actually want to focus on something that I think is much bigger. I want to talk about how we prepare children to navigate the digital world that will expose them to information about sex, relationships, and sexuality at a much younger age and in greater quantities than any other generation in history, honestly. This is a first for the world, and helping children understand how to navigate that is going to be much more helpful and useful to parents than me just spending this entire time telling you that you shouldn't allow your child on Snapchat and all these things. Instead, that is a conversation for another time. I want to focus on how can you help your kids to be critical thinkers, to really make choices with integrity, and do it in a value-based way. Because remember, we're directing them towards these values that we want them to have and that they ultimately have to choose for themselves. So your job as a parent is to help them question things and help them ask the right questions so that they can reflect on what they think and what this choice is going to result in, and if that is something that they really want, if that is what they value, if that is going to give them what they are seeking. So we're going to teach them how to seek for good things and where they won't find it and how they'll be able to tell. That's what we're going to focus on today. Now, one of the things that surprised me when I first started researching this particular topic is how often adults underestimate what children are actually encountering online. And again, I think it's because this is a first. Most of us did not grow up with phones at, a very, very young age, or iPads, whereas kids nowadays are. So it's just things that you were never exposed to as a child that your child is. It's understandable that it would be quite shocking and surprising of what access your child can have to explicit material. Many parents still imagine that exposure to sexual content happens during the teenage years, but the reality is that for many children, it does happen much earlier. Depending on which study you're looking at, the average age of first exposure to pornography often falls somewhere between late elementary school and early middle school. Before I moved here to Australia, I actually did know of a school in the Utah County area where they were having a really big issue with their first graders actually being not only exposed to pornography, but also exchanging images and like distributing that. And it was a really rough situation that was going on because parents were just so shocked that this was going on in first grade. Yes, that is quite young, but from what we know from these studies is, yes, that's on the earlier end, but the access that these children have to technology increases their risk significantly. And that's why it's important that these conversations are happening at younger and younger ages, because you could be the most attentive, incredible parent in the world, but where most of these children in this school were getting that information and getting those images and things, it was from other students. It was not from, the school itself. It was not at home. It was being distributed amongst these, children at recess and different things like that. What's also interesting when you look at these studies about exposure to explicit material is that The large percentage of these exposures are not intentional, and children aren't actively seeking out pornography or any sort of like sexual content. Usually the first time that they encounter it, they find it through advertisements, social media algorithms, links shared by friends, group chats, gaming platforms, that's a big one, search results, or simple curiosity that leads them to somewhere that they weren't expecting to go. That distinction matters because it changes the approach of the conversation. If parents assume that their child is going looking for this content, especially teenagers, that there's a huge assumption on that, and on children in that age group, anywhere from 13 until 18, there's a massive assumption that they are seeking this out. But if we can really come at it with what the data says and shows, that a lot of times from the beginning, even into the teenage years, it's often not intentional exposure that's going on. So instead of having a conversation that focuses on prevention and punishment for behavior and having questions like, how do I stop my child from ever seeing something inappropriate, we need the question to instead be, how do I prepare my child for the moment that they inevitably encounter something confusing, sexual, upsetting, or inappropriate online? That's where we want to focus. From a developmental perspective, children are not designed to have all of this information and process it in the same way that adults do. So children are naturally curious, and that curiosity is healthy and developmentally normal. Going back to our conversations about masturbation and about pornography, panicking and assuming that it automatically is sexual for your child because you understand it as sexual material is a large assumption that you're making, because most of the time it isn't sexual for the child or for the teen. It depends on what age they are, but especially preteens, it's going to be often more innocent than we are assuming, because we're putting our adult development and our adult thinking onto the situation rather than looking at it from a child's perspective developmentally or a teenager's. Researchers have consistently found that curiosity is one of the primary ways that children learn about the world around them. So that's a good thing. We want to be encouraging curiosity. The problem is that the internet often provides answers before children have the maturity, the context, or most importantly, the critical thinking skills necessary to interpret what they are seeing. So instead of learning about relationships, sexuality, boundaries, and consent through trusted adults in their lives, many children now in this day and age are receiving those messages through social media influencers, anonymous internet users, pornography, and just media and entertainment. For LDS parents, I think that this is a unique challenge. Most LDS parents that I meet want their children to learn about sexuality through that value-based lens that I teach it through. We want conversations about our bodies, relationship, intimacy, sexuality, all of that stuff to happen within the context of our beliefs and our values. But if we aren't having those conversations ourselves, the internet will happily do that for you. The problem is, of course, that we know the internet is not particularly concerned with whether the information that they're providing is accurate, healthy, ethical, and certainly not aligned with the values that you may have in your home. That's why I personally believe that online sexual safety is not primarily a technology problem. I actually believe that it is a relationship problem. It's a communication problem. And ultimately, it is a preparation problem. That is what we are seeing, not only in the LDS religion, but in other high-demand religions where prevention is the number one action taken. We see a huge increase in pornography usage, in explicit materials, in more compulsive behaviors around sexuality, this hypersexualization, because the most protected child is not necessarily the child that has the strictest filters, the most monitoring software, or the fewest devices. Those tools can be helpful, absolutely. I'm not discouraging those. And I encourage a lot of parents to use those. But research shows that the strongest protective factors for children is having a parent that they feel comfortable talking to when something happens. You can take the internet off your kid's phone all day long. You can have all of these things in place. But if you're not having the conversations about boundaries, about privacy, how to recognize manipulation, that when your child is exposed, because they will be. I mean, the AI is just going to continue getting bigger. The apps are going to change. The way in which they are exposed is going to continue to evolve. So we need to take a step away from just the preventative approach. It's not working, and it will continue to be the least likely way for your child to actually avoid this type of content that you're wanting them to avoid that does not align with your values. You instead need to be focusing on how you respond to something inappropriate. And most importantly, your child needs to know that you are someone they can come to without fear, shame, or punishment when something online makes them feel uncomfortable. That you have had conversations with them, that it is an open topic and conversation in your home so that they know that, oh my goodness, when this happens, when they see something, when they're exposed to something, when they hear something, whatever it may be, that they can come to you and they know they're not going to be punished. They are not going to have shame from you, that they know that you're going to help them understand what it was that they saw and help them to make choices around that material. And I know it is it's so hard because so many parents want to just shelter their child and they want to protect them, and it can be a lot easier when you're in faith communities. Like if you live in Utah County, for instance, you're surrounded by a lot of people that have the same belief systems, that have the same kind of way of living. So it makes it a little bit easier to have this protective bubble. But the reality is that's not necessarily very real anymore. And it can then be more shocking to you when you find out that, your first grader is exposed to pornography or exposed to sexual behaviors. That can be, when that bubble is popped that you thought that you created, that can be really difficult to navigate as a parent. And I see that all the time because I work with the adults, I work with the parents, and then all of their processing that they're having about this and the shame that they feel and their reaction gets in the way of actually being able to create a safe space for their child to come to them, because again, we've talked about your child does not have the capacity to deal with your anxiety as well as their own. So we want to be talking to them about how to navigate this and show your comfortability with this topic. That is the key. That is the key to anything dealing with sexuality. When it comes to parenting, you do not need to be an expert. Your child does not need that, nor do they expect that. The only thing that you need to do to truly help them is make sure they know that you're comfortable with this, that you can handle these conversations, and that this isn't going to be shocking information to you when they come to you. That is all you really need. So you don't have to stress too much. There are a million experts out there that can give you guides and give you help, and sexedrescue.com is a great resource. Like, there are tools and things for you. Your only job is to make sure that your child knows not only that they can come to you, but that's just a small part, telling them that they can come to you. You need to show them how comfortable you are with these things. That is what will tell them more than any words that you speak of, you can come to me about this. That's great. We want to make sure that that's vocalized, but just having it be a normal conversation when you speak about it, making it a normal thing, that is what's going to show them, okay, this is something that mom and dad can handle, and I think they're going to react okay when I come to them. So let's start to break this down by what kind of things are most common for parents to jump to and they think that that's being helpful. versus what it's actually resulting in. So first example, let's imagine a child is told by a parent, if you ever see pornography, close it immediately. I think in theory, yeah, that sounds good because you're telling them like, shut it and then you can come and talk to me. The problem with that is that it assumes that children know what they're looking at and also how to regulate their emotional response, how to respond to their own curiosity, and how to handle whatever feelings that they're feeling afterwards. So there are several skills wrapped up in that one instruction of, if you ever see pornography, close it immediately and then come talk to me. There's a lot going on there that we're assuming a child will be able to handle when research shows they can't. A child who accidentally stumbles across pornography, they may feel really confused, or they may feel curious, maybe scared, a bit embarrassed. They may not fully understand what it is that they're seeing, depending on what age they are. If the only message that they have ever received is, don't look at this, they may not know what to do with any of those emotions that they're feeling. And this is one of the reasons that shame can become such a significant issue, even if you're really not meaning to. Children can often assume that because they saw something sexual, they must have done something wrong, even when the exposure was accidental. So one of the frameworks that I find most helpful is shifting from a rule-based prevention to skill-based prevention. Instead of only teaching children what not to do, we're going to teach them how to think. We're going to teach them how to recognize uncomfortable situations. We teach them how to trust their instincts when something feels wrong. We teach them how to leave a conversation, close a website, block a user, or ask an adult for help. Those are all skills that you can teach of how to do this, where the buttons are, and give them role play scenarios. And when they do say something to you of like, Mom, I was at school today and so was talking about this and I felt really uncomfortable. And so I said, this, or I walked away. That is amazing. We want to be congratulating them on that and ask them more. Oh, wow. What was it? Did you just have a thought? Did you feel something in your body that made you feel uncomfortable? I am so proud of you for listening to that. We want to be trusting ourselves because you absolutely did what your body was telling you to do. And listening to those signals, sometimes that can be difficult. And just really rewarding them and saying like how great it is that they recognized that and that they trusted themselves and they made a choice because of how they felt. That is what we want to be encouraging. Having conversations where it sounds a bit like this. Hey, there may be a time when you see a picture or a video online that shows people without clothes or doing things that maybe you don't understand what they're doing. Depending on their age, maybe you can give some examples. Like if they're at an age where you've already talked about what sex is and how that works, you could be saying that, you may come across something where two people are having sex. Or they may be doing it in a way that you're unfamiliar with or that we haven't talked about, and that may be really confusing. If that ever happens, I want you to know that you're never going to get in trouble for that. I want you to just come talk to me about it, because that can be confusing. My job, it's not to get mad at you. My job is to help you understand what you're seeing. That is my job as your mom or your dad. I am here to help you understand what these things mean and so that you can make a choice about it. Another really good conversation and even role play that you could do with your child that I think would be really helpful is asking this question. What would you do if someone in your group chat sent you a picture that you feel uncomfortable with? What would you do? Depending on the age of your child, if this is, a preteen, maybe you ask them that question earlier in the day and you're like, hey, I'd love to discuss this at dinner tonight. And you can make it a family discussion. Or maybe they're a little bit older, they're a teenager, so they can answer more on the spot, but you want to give them time to think and let them go through that situation in their head. That's going to be really helpful because you're helping build resilience, critical thinking, and you're also showing them a lot of autonomy, that you respect what their opinion is about this and that you aren't necessarily looking for the right answer, but you genuinely want to know what they would do and why they would make the choices that they would make. because that's going to tell you a lot about where their values are, where maybe they're getting held up, what they view as inappropriate and what they view as okay. That's going to give you a lot of insight. So we just want to listen. Maybe their answer is leaving the group chat. Well, okay, press on that a little bit more. Tell me more about that. Why would that be your immediate response? And would that have any repercussions? Because we want to be realistic, That's probably not going to be someone's first reaction to someone sending something in a group chat that's inappropriate. Oh, okay, I'm just going to leave the group chat. Okay, well, what if that group chat is like your group chat for your class and you guys have a group project together? Is it really realistic to think that you're going to leave that? Helping them think through those things and allowing them to really process that is the best way that you can prepare them for these situations. This is also a great opportunity whenever you're watching something, some sort of media content, just some viral clip online, where you can pause and you can ask, what do you think about this? What do you think of this person's relationship? That's in this really popular TV show that they like to watch. What do you think about how he treated her or how she treats him or whatever it may be? How do you feel about their friendship? Do you feel like they're being good friends? How do you feel about their relationship that they have with their parents? Tell me about that, because you want to understand where your child's head is at and how they're viewing the world. And that way you can also create these conversations to help them navigate them better. Here is a really simple one. Instead of saying, don't believe everything you see online, which that's true, but that's not helpful. Instead, we want to teach children how to ask questions. So these are the type of questions we want them to be asking, especially once they're older, once they're in their teenage years. Who benefits from me believing this? When you watch something, when they talk about something, who benefits from them believing that? What is their answer? Is this person trying to sell me something? That's a great question to ask when they're looking at things. You want them to be reflecting on, does this relationship seem healthy? Does it seem realistic? Does this align with my personal values? Having them reflect on what their values are. These are the types of questions that will help them become active consumers of media rather than, these passive participants to whatever the algorithm places in front of them. We want them to be asking these questions. Who benefits from me believing this? Is it God? Is it this person that's trying to sell me something? Who is benefiting here? And if it's not me, then who is it? Continuing with this online conversation, I want to talk about online relationships. So this can include everything from online romantic relationships and conversations to grooming behaviors. One of the most important things that parents should understand about grooming is that it rarely starts with sexual content. It often first starts with attention. Researchers who study grooming consistently find that offenders build trust before they will ever introduce something sexual. They offer compliments, they listen, they make your child feel really special, and then they will gradually isolate your child from trusted adults and create secrecy around the relationship. And because of this, I think the conversation about online predators should focus less on fear and more on recognizing manipulation. For example, children should know that safe adults do not ask them to keep secrets from their parents. That is point blank, period. Safe adults do not pressure them for photos. Safe adults will not make them responsible for protecting a relationship, especially the relationship with them. It is not a child or teen's responsibility to protect the relationship that they have with this person from their parents. A conversation that you could have with your child could sound something like, if someone online ever asks you to keep a secret from me and they tell you that, we just wouldn't get it, or that this is your life so you get to choose, those are all very common manipulations because they are making it seem like this is your responsibility, and it's not. you get to choose what you're actually gonna do, and they're taking away the choice of telling us, but saying that it's really your choice. That is manipulation. So you want to point that out to them, to do some role play scenarios, some different conversations of what they may sound like, and have your child point out, where's the manipulation in this? What are they saying that sounds pretty good, where it's like, don't let your parents tell you what to do. They wouldn't understand. Where is the manipulation in that? And get some feedback. Especially teenagers, they do think about these things and they can have really great insights here, but we don't want to just spoon feed them the answers. Instead, we want them to be thinking about, why are we having this conversation? Why are we talking about this? Why do I have to recognize this? How do I recognize it? So that when they encounter it, or if they encounter it, they can think about it rather than just being coerced into something, being manipulated into it. They can go, wait a second, this sounds like manipulation to me. And that can happen with people who are of a different age, who are older, who are grooming, but it can also happen with peers as well. Sticking on this for just one more second here, if your child is being groomed, as I mentioned before, one of the number one tactics is making them feel special, making them feel listened to and heard. So, recognizing that and having conversations about that it can feel really good to feel special to someone, to feel seen, to feel heard, and that is not wrong. And perpetrators know that. They know how good that feels, and that's why they use that as their tactic to get to know you. So also helping your child be able to recognize when maybe they are feeling a bit lonely, which is why this online relationship may feel so good, may feel so freeing, and they feel so heard and listened to because they don't feel heard and listened to at home or at school or in other places. And helping them see that just because this is being offered by someone, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's where it should be offered from, that there is conversations that your child can have with you, and helping give them words of, hey, I'm feeling kind of lonely and I feel like you're not giving me the attention that I need, and I don't feel really special in this house. And allowing a space where your child can come to you and express that can be such a game changer. So asking your child questions like, hey, I've noticed that, you haven't been hanging around the family very much. You've kind of just been going to your room. Instead of immediately placing it on the child of like, what's going on? Instead, taking that moment to reflect on maybe where you're coming short as a parent, which you are an amazing parent. I am sure you are doing everything in your power to help your child, but if you're placing it on them in that conversation of like, hey, what's happening? You're probably not going to get an answer. But if you come to them and you're like, hey, listen, I understand I haven't really been able to give you the attention that I think that you deserve in the last few weeks because, your sister's been sick. I've been really busy with work. And I just wanted to say that I'm sorry about that. And I want you to know that I want you to feel special and I want you to feel important in this house. Because I know that sometimes when you don't feel that way, it can be easy to seek that attention from other places. And there's a lot of people out in the world that want to take advantage of that and that want to make you feel important, but they don't do it because they love you. They do it because they want something from you. And I just don't want that to happen. So is there something that we can do this week or today or, whatever it may be, where there's something that you're really wanting to do or something that's important to you that I could focus a little bit more of my time and attention on? Again, that's a really one way to have that conversation. Hopefully that can just give you maybe a couple avenues of being like, oh, okay, this part connected with you and maybe some didn't. But one, we want to be creating that open space for them, and two, we want to be acknowledging where maybe we're seeing some behaviors, maybe we're seeing some some things that could potentially be concerning, and instead of putting it on them, you taking a moment to show them, like, hey, I want to communicate with you. I want this relationship. And then also having this warning that, like, you're not oblivious to where these types of situations can go, that you are aware, and that there may be something going on. That can show a lot to your child in various ways, to come to you, to tell you, but also to help them recognize if they are being manipulated. The last thing I want to touch on today, because again, this is just broad strokes, this is just a couple ways that we can actually have these conversations and ways to think about online safety, but I want to talk about privacy. One thing that researchers consistently find is that children often understand privacy in the physical world long before they actually understand it digitally and in the digital world. Most children eventually learn that certain parts of your body are private. They understand that we don't walk into the bathroom while someone else is using it, and they'll start knocking on a bedroom or asking you to knock on their bedroom door before you enter. But in the digital world, this introduces a completely different layer of privacy that many children don't know how to navigate, and it feels very different. So, for example, children may understand that they shouldn't give their number to like a stranger or give a stranger their address, but they don't always understand that sharing their school, their sports team, their daily routine, their location, or even certain photos can reveal personal information about themselves. So to a child, posting a picture on Instagram of their soccer practice, that may seem completely harmless, that may seem completely fine. But to an adult, that may contain a school logo, a location, a tag, and enough information for someone to figure out where your child is and spend several hours a week. So we want to be having these privacy conversations ongoing, just throughout childhood, throughout their adolescence, helping them understand, one, that you don't owe anyone your time online. That is not something you owe them. You don't owe someone a response to personal information. You never owe someone a picture. Never. And put it in the context of the physical world. So saying, if you were to take this photo or if you were to give out this information to someone, would you do it in person? If they were standing in front of you, would you give it to them? How well do you know this person? Would you feel comfortable doing that? And if the answer is no, then we should not be doing it online just because it's a little bit easier and it's less confronting. So we want to teach them to be listening to those signals that they would have in person, when they're with someone and they feel uncomfortable. That's amazing. Listen to those signals. We're going to be congratulating that and working on those. But then helping them figure out those signals in an online platform by asking them those questions. Before you send something, before you feel comfortable posting this, I want you to think about this. Would you say this to that person if they were standing in front of you? Sexting is a big one for teenagers, of feeling very confident, very promiscuous once they're, just over the phone. And it can make things very erotic. There's a lot to it that is quite enticing, but keeping it all in the context of, would you say this to that person in person? Why not? What would make you not say this? If you were eye to eye with that person sitting in your bedroom, why would you not say it to them? What would your body be telling you? And then talking about why our body is sending us different signals when it's online. Why would it be, maybe feel wrong, feel inappropriate if it was happening in person, but online it feels really exciting and exhilarating and good? Why does it feel that way? Talking about how when you're online, there's really a space between you and what you're doing. And there is a certain freedom that's allowed in that. You can feel kind of anonymous. You can feel a step away from the responsibility of the choices that you're making and the consequences of them, because you're quite literally not face to face with them. And the feeling that you get when you don't have to take the responsibility, or when you can be a little bit more sneaky and you feel a little bit more confident because you can just say this and like, oh, you can just wait for their answer rather than looking them in the eyes and seeing their reaction to what you just said. That is a much more vulnerable, whereas online is far less vulnerable. And when you are less vulnerable and when you're less intimate, true intimacy is friendship, deep friendship, and that's what we're working towards. We're working towards healthy, intimate relationships, and knowing that intimacy, true intimacy, cannot be created just online or through your phone. That it's this novelty, it's this feels almost forbidden, which our bodies love that, our brains love that. It loves the thought of getting away with something and breaking some rules. Like there's a excitement and a dopamine and a real chemical release when that happens. But what it prevents us from growing is our development in our healthy, intimate relationships, in our sexual integrity, in our ability to stand tall when we make a choice and to face the consequences of that choice. That is what it's keeping us from. So having those conversations, especially with teenagers, but you want to be starting it from such a young age. So it's a gradual conversation that continues to evolve, continues to shift well into their teenage years, when they're moaning and groaning and saying, oh my goodness, we get it, we know. That's what you want. You want them to get to the stage where this is such a talked about conversation that they're sick of it. Great. That's the goal, because you've given them so much space and time to critically think, to develop these things, that it becomes the mundane, it becomes the normal. And so when they come across those situations, when they're presented with the opportunity to sext, or when someone tries to groom them, or when they are exposed to online sexual content, that their reaction is what you would hope it would be, but it's because you helped them come to that themselves. It's because you helped them develop the skill to read their body and their feelings and make choices, and you provided a space where they knew they could come to you if they needed to help process this stuff, that this entire subject is not off limits. In fact, they would wish that you stopped talking about it because, oh my goodness, you're so annoying about how often you talk about sex and sexuality and consent, and like, we get it. You want it to be this just normalized thing, because that is what will help protect your child the most. Then rather than having no internet on their phone and no having all of these apps prevented from being accessed, they will still be exposed through their peers, through school, through a variety of ways. So we want to just help create resilient, capable children that turn into adults capable of healthy, intimate relationships, both in person and online. And thank you so much. That is today's episode. I hope you have a great rest of your week. Make sure to check out all of the resources on sexedrescue.com. And you can also check out my Patreon, The Virgin Sex Educator, for all of your content for adults.